What are the most important things in impossible magic? Which things do you need to know? And what sort of impossible magic is actually in this book? Seriously, if it's impossible, how did they write a whole book on it? Ha! Checkmate, Paizo. This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In this video chapter, I'm taking a look at Impossible Magic, the upcoming new rulebook for Pathfinder 2e, and pointing out what I think are the most important parts. So I'll be looking through and talking about the classes, class changes, dedications, new items, spells, all of the stuff that I think is really important to know, whether you're a player or a GM. And please consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this, and if you have a hype left for this week, please click the hype button to hype up the Dominomicon so smaller creators like myself can get more visibility. Thanks regardless for watching. You're clearly almost as handsome as I am. So let's cast an impossible spell to bring on the music. Right, so what even is Impossible Magic? It's the latest book release for PF2E, due to release on the 30th of July 2026, so almost 2 weeks from this video's release. Impossible Magic is just over 250 pages and gives us 2 whole new classes, the Necromancer and Runesmith, and updates the Magus and Summoner, plus a few new dedications, updates to existing ones, new spells, items, lots of stuff in this book. So I'm just going to dive into what I think are the 10 most important things from this new rulebook, then give my general thoughts on the book near the end. As this book isn't actually out when this video releases, I'm not going to go super into depth because you need to buy the book yourself to see it all. But it should be enough info so you know about the most essential parts of this lovely new rulebook. So enough messing around, let's begin. When Paizo remastered PF2E, they removed the magical schools, which meant that Wizard can no longer be a Necromancer. So now we have a full Necromancer class instead, and honestly, it's probably worth the sacrifice as this class looks really fun. I guess time will tell on how good this class actually is, but it certainly looks different to anything that exists currently. The Necromancer is an 8 health prepared occult spellcaster trained in light armor and simple weapons, and its key attribute is intelligence. They also get undead lore, which makes sense as that's kind of the whole thing. This whole class is about raising thralls. This is done via the Create Thrall cantrip, which you get immediately upon choosing this class. This allows you to either make 2 thralls in unoccupied squares within 30 feet, or you can create 1 in an occupied square and immediately command it. That may sound strange, but these thralls are sort of like incredibly weak summons. They automatically fail all of their saving throws, have 1 HP, and they don't even body block enemy creatures. And you can actually just use the inevitable return reaction instead of spending your precious actions to bring back an enemy you have murderized as a thrall, which is super thematic and horrific, but I love it. And so once you have them on the field, there's a bunch of cool stuff you can do with your thralls, and that's basically how the whole class works. Obviously, you can command them to attack, and they're going to do a little bit of damage, or you can do things like use them to cast spells from with Reach of the Dead, or you can use them to shield yourself from attack using the Body Shield feat. And obviously, there's lots more stuff you can do with your thralls, as that's the major theme of this class. And some of the feats here look incredibly fun. Bloodpool in particular takes my fancy as I like all the heals. The Necromancer uses a similar spellcasting system to the Psychic, but prepared rather than spontaneous, and this is going to come up a couple more times in this video. So when you're not creating more thralls, you're casting spells, though you can make a Necromancer more martial focused if you like, as it's similar to the Cleric in that it has 2 subclass options you can choose initially, called your Fatal Method, which is kind of like the Cloistered Cleric and War Priest. You also get a Grim Fascination, which is a sort of second subclass option, which is going to give you a specific Grave spell, which are your Necromancer focus spells, and it gives you a Thrall enhancement, which slightly alters how your Thrall works. Some of these Grave spells look really fun, like Life Tap or Zombie Horde, and there's lots more where that came from. So ultimately, this is just basically a spellcaster with minions, and probably a better minion class than the one that shall not be mentioned. Well, until later in the video when I have to talk about it. Yeah, I'm not happy about it either. But yeah, time will tell how good this class is, but the Necromancer seems quite different to all the other classes out there, something Paizo excels at with PF2E. If you like the idea of having multiple undead allies on the battlefield with you, and you like the thought of blowing them up to damage enemies, draining the life from enemies to boost your HP or whatever, then this class should be right up your alley. My only concern is flavor. It's really hard in PF2E lore to make a Necromancer that isn't a bit evil. Technically, alignments don't exist in PF2E anymore, but still. Necromancy is a very bad thing in this universe due to how souls, etc. work, but I'm sure you can work with the GM to make a Necromancer that isn't pure evil. I just feel like this is a thing that's going to come up time and time again when the players are using this class. Hopefully that's enough so you roughly understand the Necromancer, so let's move on to my favorite addition from this rulebook. The Runesmith looks so much fun. This is a martial-focused 8 HP class with training in medium armor, martial weapons, and its primary attribute is intelligence. And so this class is, unsurprisingly, unless you're a fool, all about runes. They get the Trace Rune and Invoke Rune abilities. Trace Rune is 1 action, so long as the target is adjacent to you, or 2 actions if they are within 30 feet, and they last until the end of your next turn, though you can spend 10 minutes in exploration mode to etch any number of runes up to your max amount, and these last forever and ever. And the Invoke Rune action has you utter the name of 2 of these runes within 30 feet, which applies the invocation, and yes, we'll actually get to those runes in a sec. And please bear in mind that Trace Rune has the Manipulate trait, though Invoke doesn't. Just something to keep in mind if you're going to be doing this up close. So you learn 4 runes immediately and can have 2 in use in combat at any given time, though this increases as you level up. As for the runes themselves, there's over 40, which is a lot. 16 of them are level 1, which is crazy choice for such a low level, but it makes sense as this class has no subclass. So how these runes work is that you inscribe them on a creature, object, ally, etc., which will immediately do a thing, and then you can invoke the rune using the Invoke Rune single action, which will trigger its invocation, and that can do other things. And there's other ways to engrave runes by taking certain feats, like the Engraving Strike single action. So long as you're wielding a melee weapon, you can attack and trace a rune at the same time. And there's ways to make your Runesmith range by using actions like Remote Detonation, which has you make a ranged strike and invokes the rune at the same time for 1 action. And so yeah, there's so many of these runes. I'll just run through a few that stood out to me. Holtrick Rune of Dwarven Ramparts. The passive is a +1 AC bonus to a shield when raised, and you can invoke this on an ally to raise their shield for them. Atrial Rune of Fire is a fire damaging one, unsurprisingly. It reduces fire resistance by 5 +1 for every 2 levels, and then you can Kaplode them, dealing 1d8 fire damage per 2 levels. Burn, baby, burn. Liskel Rune of Frost seems fun for low levels. It makes the rune bearer lose 5 speed, and if they move, they become clumsy 1. Invoking it deals 1d4 cold damage for every 2 levels, and all adjacent squares are difficult terrain. Freeze, baby, freeze. Yodichi Rune of Remonstrance at level 9 seems very strong, as this can simply repair your shield when you invoke it, and the +1 AC to allies within 10 feet is great too. Repairing a shield mid-combat is actually very hard to do in PF2E, so this is crazy good. Germantria, Rune of Partnership, also at level 9, it seems like it's making treat wounds checks a thing of the past. The passive shares the damage between you and the ally it's on, but you can invoke it to heal 20 HP to each of you. It seems low, considering it's level 9, but you could just do this out of combat, right? Over and over and over again until your entire party is fully healed. Pronine, Rune of Leeching. 9 seems pretty fun. Etched onto a slashing or piercing weapon, this deals extra void damage and gives you temp HP that lasts a round. Invoking it as a 30-foot cone of 4d10 void damage. Nasty. Obviously, there's so much more to go over with this class because there's a lot of runes, but it's really interesting. It's intelligence-based martial class, which is just really cool. It's got a little hint of magic in there. Really fun stuff, and I cannot wait to get to see this in proper play. Definitely take a look at this class if you want some cool runic abilities and you want a martial with a little bit of magic with some varied class roles. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there's some comments online currently about the Runesmith potentially having incredibly high damage at certain high levels. The term nuke has been thrown around. Obviously, we'll need to playtest this class properly over time, but I just wanted to let GMs know about this possible issue. Right, fun time is over. On to the summoner changes. So first things first, there's not a ridiculous amount of changes to the summoner. They've kind of removed the whole bounded spellcasting system almost entirely from what I can tell, and actually given summoner more of a psychic-based spellcasting system, as I mentioned earlier. However, they do not get a 10th rank spell slot. They're still signature spellcasters with a spell repertoire, which is great, but they've also lost the infinite signature spells thing, but that makes sense as now they have actual proper spell slots. And we've had 2 new Eidolons added, the Aberrant and the Ooze. A little bit of criticism here for Paizo. I'm a little bit confused with Eidolons and how when they're unmanifested they function, because they got a section here called Unmanifested Eidolons that says the duration of anything they have still passes. Does that mean that persistent damage still works the same way? Because it's kind of confusing because your Eidolon doesn't get to roll a recovery check, right? So I guess you would have to roll it, but if it's not there, I just don't really get how this works. It's kind of confusing. It does say the GM decides ultimately, I guess, but still, I feel like this could have been cleared up a little bit better. There's some new feats added like Magical Onslaught, which is pretty fun, and and a few more that I'm not going to get into now. Dragon Eidolons can now be any tradition, which makes sense with the remastered changes to dragons. I've seen some alterations with Eidolon stats, like Angel losing some constitution for reasons. Overall, there's been some cool new feats added, some alterations here and there, especially with the removal of bounded spellcasting, but there's not really any massive changes outside of that as far as I can tell. It does seem like overall improvements regardless. I still feel like the Summoner is a little undertuned. I think we could have done with some more Eidolon-based abilities rather than spell slots. I've always seen the Summoner as more of that sort of class. Like, it's not a full spellcaster as such, it's more like an Eidolon master or something. But it's still, most of these changes are positive, I guess. And with the Summoner over and done with, thank goodness, let's move onwards to a fun class. Magus has definitely had some more changes than Summoner, I feel. Like the Summoner, it also gains the 2 spell slot system with no 10th ranked spell, which is always good because I hated the very limited bounded spellcasting system. It's still a prepared spellcaster, of course. On top of that, we've had 2 more subclasses added, one that's based on dual wielding weapons and one that's based on using guns. All good stuff. They've also made it that when you cast one of your studious spells, you enter your Arcane Cascade as a free action on that turn, which is great because Arcane Cascade was a bit difficult to justify getting into before. And it also gives you resistance to damage from spells while you're in that stance. Always good to give yourself more reasons to get into it. There's a few new feats added, of course, such as running recharge, which allows you to move and recharge your spell strike at the same time. Sprinting spell strike is pretty fun as well, as it physically propels you across the battlefield so you can whack an enemy with a melee spell strike at the end of the line. Good fun. Spell crash, it seemed a bit crazy. If you have a trip weapon, getting to use a lower ranked spell slot to make a bunch of enemies prone for 2 actions is very powerful at just level 6. And double spell strike at level 19 looks incredibly fun, especially as it's a class feature, not a feat that you need to grab. And so yeah, a bunch of micro changes to the Magus, generally making them a little bit more interesting to play or making them a little bit more viable for their Arcane Cascade, etc. Good stuff overall. And that's the new Magus, so let's move on to the multi-class dedications so you know how they work. So we're going to start with the Summoner. The Summoner dedication was honestly the worst in the entire system, and unfortunately I don't really see any good changes here aside from getting the psychic spellcasting stuff. You still can't do any tandem actions or act together, making this particular dedication still kind of worthless. And the dedication's actually lost a feat as well. It used to get a thing called Signature Synergy, which allowed your Eidolon to take a different form like Airborne, Burrowing, or even Hulking Size, but that's gone now as far as I can tell. I'm just not quite sure why they couldn't put a feat in there at maybe level 8 to level 10 that allows you to start using tandem actions. Like, not act together, but there's a few tandem actions in there that could be fun to actually have and give you a reason to pick this dedication. And this is the thing, I don't really see the point in this dedication without any of those tandem actions. It's probably the biggest crying shame about this whole book, because it's a great book, but they had a really good opportunity to make this dedication a lot more fun, a lot more actually beneficial to take, and it just isn't that right now. Similar to the Summoner, the Magus has the psychic spellcasting thing, not really sure what to call it. That's about it really. I think maybe Spell Strike could have done with a way to recharge it that isn't a 1-minute cooldown. Maybe if you spent a couple of actions or a full turn recharging it, or maybe if you got a crit or something. I don't know, just something like that would have made Spell Strike for the dedication a bit more fun, but whatever, it's still fine. The Necromancer dedication, of course, allows you to cast spells. You get 2 cantrips, the normal spellcaster dedication stuff. You become trained in occultism, and once per turn you can use a single action to create a single thrall within 30 feet. At level 4, you can start to grab the actual proper spellcasting as per normal. You can start grabbing specific grave cantrips and spells, though they are very specific. You can't just pick any of them, but it does still allow you to pick different Necromancer feats though. So realistically, this multi-class dedication just kind of limits your thralls, as you can't make 2 with 1 action. Though you can grab the inevitable return reaction at level 6, which is good. It's probably a better way of doing it if you're picking this dedication, honestly, but you're going to be missing out on the specific thrall sort of passive abilities that they normally get, plus a bunch of grave spells, because you can't just pick any of them. It's still a pretty solid dedication, doesn't look all that bad, looks pretty good. As for the Runesmith dedication, you get to pick 2 first level runes, though you can only sustain up to 1 etched rune at once, though that goes to 2 at level 9 and 3 at level 17. Though bear in mind that at level 17, if you're a normal runesmith, you can have up to 6, so yeah, it's pretty limited. And you're not actually able to trace runes in combat until you get to level 6 and take the feat Tracing Studies, but you can still etch them in exploration mode, just like the normal runesmith, and you can still invoke them for a single action. I guess that's the biggest restriction, plus the whole only being able to have 1, 2, 3 runes out at once for this dedication. It's still absolutely worth taking if you just have 1 or 2 really cool runes that you really wanted for your class or your allies or whatever. Also, I noticed a teeny tiny thing that needs errata ing. The Runesmith dedication doesn't mention any class DC or anything like that, meaning that your offensive runes will always fail. I think that just needs a little fix from Paizo. Maybe by the time this video is out, they've already fixed it though, so it's probably a null issue. Now that's the multiclass dedications. Onto the other deads. As there's quite a few of these, we'll just do a quick summary, and we have reprints of the Captivator, the Soul Forger, so I'll skip over them for time reasons, and we've got 5 new dedications. The Hedge Mage is a wisdom or intelligence-based caster, and you get to pick from all 4 traditions of spells when you pick this dedication. You store your spells in a keepsake, which looks like you get a lot of cantrips, unlike most of the other spellcaster dedications. The Humble Spell is also really cool, letting you spell shape a spell to remove the Manipulate trait. Combine that with a Witch's Coven spell, and a grabbed ally doesn't have to worry about that flat check. The Living Nexus turns you into a walking conduit of magic, letting you absorb spells to become overflowing and boost your saves. Once overflowing, you can use Overflowing Blade to add scaling force damage to your strikes, or unleash a quick one-action Ether Blast, which is just cool because I love Ether abilities. It even snags Healing Nexus at level 8, giving a cheeky 30 HP heal because, well, you know, I love my heals. The Spell Shifter uses a light bulk conduit to shift ongoing spells, letting you sustain them for free on a successful Arcana check using your own stats. They're all about enhancing, redirecting, and sustaining spells, which is pretty interesting indeed. The Veil Dancer is all about stealth, teleportation, and hit-and-run tactics, kicking off with a 2-action Part the Veil ability to grab concealment for hiding as long as you're unobserved. At level 12, Afterimage lets you pull off a crazy combo. This is one of my players who mentioned this to me. If you use Blink Charge to teleport in and attack, then use Skirmish Strike to step, teleport back, and leave an Afterimage next to them, it's definitely going to drive your GM completely mad. Adding some crazy damage potential from the Hush ability, and it's a seriously fun dedication indeed. The World Rouser is all about awakening the natural world around you, starting with the 1-action Rouse the World to drop a 10-foot burst within 30 feet. This gives you and your allies inside the burst a +1 circumstance bonus to athletics, acrobatics, and nature checks to recall knowledge about local creatures and hazards. Feats-wise, Nature's Embrace is pretty good because difficult terrain is always fun, and Wake and Tremble just sounds funny as well. And that's the dedications. Moving on. So the Wizard has been given a few new arcane schools with some school spells. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I did like Fact Check, because a tiny version of your best self appearing on your shoulder to tell you whether something is correct or not is just hilarious to me. The roleplay potential for this and making your players cry with laughter is so good. Hot Air seemed cool to me because they burn when they open their stupid mouths. I guess it reminded me of myself when I talk about the Summoner. There's a few new feats for Wizard too, like Incriminating Spell, which just seemed kind of funny to me. Getting to convince a creature that someone else tried to alter its mind is just amazing. And Spellbinding Speech is pretty cool. For 1 action, you make an Arcana check against a creature's will DC. If you succeed, they're unable to do reactions until the start of your next turn, which could be very useful, especially as you're a wizard and you may need to cast a spell when an enemy is next to you, so you can just 1 action, turn off its reactions, cast a spell. Pretty cool. Obviously, there's plenty more here, but let's move on to the new Automaton stuff. So automatons have had 12 new ancestry feats added to them, as the Nexian city of Quantium has managed to crack the code on creating new automatons, which is pretty good because before you had to say they were like thousands of years old. This comes with 2 new heritages, the defensive automaton, which gives you 10 hit points and toughness instead of the normal 8, and the newly minted automaton, which gives you the additional lore skill feat and an additional language. As for the feats, there's a few of them that stood out to me as particularly interesting. Hardened Chassis is really cool because it gives you resistance 3 to bludgeoning, piercing, or damage. Resistance to damage is just always fantastic to have. A Purge system is pretty cool if you're struggling to get over a particular poison. You can just reaction reduce the stage by 1. So yeah, nothing crazy added to automatons, but you know, there's a few extra feats here to make the ancestry much more worth taking. Also, I think that defensive automaton heritage is pretty fantastic. On to the magical part of this video chapter. There's over 240 spells in Impossible Magic. A bunch of them are reprints for spells that we already had pre-remaster, but otherwise there are quite a few new really cool spells in here for all 4 traditions. I always feel like Divine needs a lot more love, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to throw up some of these cooler ones that stood out to me. I'm not going to go massively into them. You can pause and check the image on screen. There's way too many for me to go over properly. Stick On seems like so much fun. This spell has someone become stuck to you until they escape or a minute passes classes. I just think it's pretty funny to be able to drag someone along with you wherever you go. Blessing of Vigor is nice if you like heals like me. Bone Shield seems really cool if you like shield abilities. Corpse Bloom seems solid because Sickened is always nice. Weight of the World seems pretty good. The damage isn't great, but the range is fantastic. And being dazzled for a minute and stunned 2 on a failure is very solid indeed. You can now revive your familiar with Familiar's Resurrection. Witches normally get the familiar back after a day if they die, but otherwise you had to wait a week. But with this, you could just do it for a normal spell. Floating Harness seems quite interesting for those with companions or eidolons. This has them float by the side of you and they stay with you as you move. Good for familiars as well, I guess. I'm assuming this means that you can still use their normal actions. You just don't have to tell them to move anymore, which can be very useful. Weapon Tide seems pretty solid, and difficult terrain with damage for only a rank 3 spell is never a bad thing. And I have to include Speak with Water because it's just as ridiculous as it sounds. I like how it specifies that rain is fleeting and knows only what it's currently touching. I love the idea of having a player character talk to water and everyone stare at them like they're absolutely, utterly insane. And Lively Flight seems really fun as you get to heal and then fly. You can either do this yourself or an ally. Doesn't trigger reactions either and heightens very nicely. We have almost 30 new rituals added though. Again, a lot of these are reprints. Peer into the Past looks pretty interesting, getting to literally look into the past for up to 10 minutes of a particular scene that happened. I do really like rituals in PF2E. I feel like we need more of them. As I said, most of these are reprints, so it'd be good to get a bunch of really cool rituals at some point. And of course, I could not do a video on impossible magic and not talk about actual impossible spells. These are once per character spells. Once you cast them, that's it. You can never cast an impossible spell ever again. And they come with their own version of sustain, I guess, called Fuel Impossible Spell, which increases your doomed value by 1 each time you do it for a single action. And some of these fuel effects for these impossible spells are quite powerful indeed. So there's only 5 of them in this book. None of them look ridiculously broken, funnily enough. The one I mentioned here is Pyroclastic Truth, which heightens incredibly well and can do a lot of damage considering it's a 100-foot burst within 500 feet. It seems pretty interesting and pretty powerful, but not completely broken considering you can only cast one of these once forever. But I guess they can't really be completely overpowered, or you might just ruin entire encounters or like end game bosses with these, especially if a bunch of players all cast it immediately. They all have it. It would wreck the entire encounter for a GM. They're still pretty cool though. I think they're more thematic than powerful. They're still powerful, don't get me wrong, but I think the theming here is much more interesting. I could keep going on about this. There's so many spells in this book that's so cool, really interesting. But let's move on so this video doesn't drag on indefinitely. Last but not least, we have the magical items sections, roughly 50-ish pages. It's huge. We've got new magical armor, runes, shields, weapons, ammunition, spell catalysts, fulus, oils, potions, talismans, apex items, grimoires, held items, spell hearts, staffs, tattoos, worn items. Once again, a lot of these are reprints because of the remaster, but there's quite a few non-reprints that stood out to me, like the mobile armor rune. It's pretty good because it allows you to, once per turn when you step, go an additional 5 feet, and that's really useful for those times when you need to cast a 2-action spell only within reach of an enemy and he has 10-foot reach. The Helping Hand spell heart, if you put it on your armor, increases your maximum and encumbered bulk limit by 1. And that is really good. People may think that's not that great, but I know so many players that are just about on the cusp of that bulk limit, and just being able to have this on your armor permanently, never worry about it, to increase that bulk limit is going to be very helpful to them. And the greater version increases it by 2, which is really good. The Escalation ammunition at level 12 is pretty good. They have to make a DC 30 fortitude save, and if they fail, the next time they roll a saving throw, it has the misfortune trait, meaning they roll twice and take the lower result. This is really good for setting up your spellcasters. There's so many items here for me to go over, but this video's gone on for way too long, so let's just do quick thoughts on what I think of this book. I think overall, Impossible Magic is a pretty solid addition to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The 2 new classes seem really interesting. I think the changes to Magus and Summoner are pretty good overall as well. I do wish we'd had a few more changes to the Summoner dedication, as I already mentioned, but overall I'm quite pleased with this book. There's a lot of reprints, but it's still definitely worth your time as it's a pretty large supplement to PF2E. So many cool spells that have been added, quite a few new interesting items, and honestly, as I already said, the classes by themselves are worth your time, full stop. So yes, I do indeed like Impossible Magic, and I do indeed recommend it to players and GMs. It's always good to support Paizo. Please consider purchasing it and giving them all the support you can. They're going through a bit of a rough time recently with the whole diamond Diamond comic distributors problem, which I'll link to it in the description if you want to read about it, but they ended up having to lay off some staff, which is a bit of a shame. Hope those guys land on their feet. And that is going to be the end of this video chapter. Hopefully that's given you the list of the most important things in Impossible Magic. Thank you very much for watching. And please consider subscribing, clicking that hype button, liking, sending the video to a friend, checking out my Patreon if you want access to the private Discord channel, or becoming a member so your name is mentioned at the end of this video, etc. And please let me know in the comments what you're most excited about with Impossible Magic. As always, I'd like to thank my amazing and brilliant artist Leandro Notado. Links to his portfolio are in the description as ever. And I would then like to thank my archivists and members: Max Magnus 20019, Ozzy Smith, Nikolai Milenkovic, Cal Travis, Bentfair, Apteryx 13, and patrons and archivists Clash, Q, and Patrick O'Donoghue. But for now, this is Dominic of the Dimmy Dimmy Team, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.